Hello everyone, welcome to my Zero to Hero series here on YouTube. This first video I'm gonna refer to as Day Zero. Day Zero is about creating a character. It's gonna be about learning combat basics, getting the early quests out of the way. It's gonna be pretty new player oriented. Most older players will know what I'm gonna cover here. A quick overview of the goals that we want to go over. First and foremost, we're going to go over character creation. Then we'll cover some of the early quests. And in doing so, we'll learn combat basics along the way. This is really geared towards new players, experiencing the game, figuring out if the game is for them. If you're just starting out on ESO, I actually recommend getting the base game. You don't necessarily have to get all the DLCs, you don't have to invest in ESO Plus, you don't need every race, every alliance. Day Zero is about figuring out if you enjoy the game, if you enjoy the content. I personally won't be playing any content except for the initial starter quest because I have the Greymoor chapter installed. But aside from that starter quest, I'll immediately be going over to content available in the base version of this game. I don't even recommend starting in DLC zones as they're not as new player friendly. So here we are on the character creation screen. In character creation, there's multiple decisions you need to make beyond what your character initially looks like. So, of course you have to pick between male or female to start. No preference, it doesn't really matter, male, female, they can all accomplish the same thing. The alliance that you're in, that is an important decision. So, if you have friends that are already playing this game, it's a good idea to ask what faction they're already playing in. And it's important that you pick a faction that is the same. If you don't, you won't be able to PvP with them. In fact, you'll only be able to PvP against them. So, for the three alliances, we have the Daggerfall Covenant, the Aldmeri Dominion, and the Ebonheart Pact. Each alliance has three associated races. So, the Daggerfall Covenant has the Breton, Orc, and Redguard races. The Aldmeri Dominion has the High Elf, Wood Elf, and Khajiit races. The Ebonheart Pact has the Argonian, Dark Elf, and Nord races. The races do matter, but not to the extent where, for a new player, I would say you gotta make a huge decision to start. Any race can really accomplish any role until you get into min-maxing, but that's gonna be after 100 hours of gameplay, and I wouldn't worry about it for a day one. Day Zero is about figuring out if you enjoy the game, and playing the game in a way that you enjoy. So beyond the faction and your friends, I wouldn't make too many decisions early on based on min-maxing. So after the alliance, the next thing you have to decide is what class you want to play. So there's currently 6 classes in ESO. You have your Dragonites, Sorcerers, Nightblades, Templars, Wardens, and Necromancers. Wardens and Necromancers are only going to be available if you purchase the associated chapter. So for Wardens, that would be Morrowind, and for Necromancers, that would be Elsewhere. At this time, if you don't want to invest money in getting these chapters, that's completely fine. All the classes are viable, there's no big advantage to Warden or Necros. In fact, I'm starting out, this is my first character on a new account, and I'm going with a Breton Nightblade. Completely base game. I'm going into Daggerfall Covenant so I can be the Breton. Don't worry about spending too much money initially, especially if this is your first experience with ESO. So, we have our alliance, our race, and our class picked out, and now we need to go through, obviously, character customization. ESO is extremely in-depth, as any Elder Scrolls game is, when it comes to character creation. For me, I know what I'm going to do. I have a character on Xbox that I'm going to format this character after, and it makes it simple. Alright, so we have character creation finished off. I made my character. Her name is Valentine South, same name as that I use on my Xbox character. As you can see, we're loading into a DLC area. This will be the starter zone for the Greymore chapter. If you didn't purchase Greymore, you will load into a starter zone named the Whaling Prison. It's an area in Cold Harbor that you will need to escape before you can start your normal quests. Quick note before we go any further, if you're playing with a controller as I do, being a Xbox transfer, you're going to want to go into your settings here in gameplay, toggle your gamepad, and turn on your gamepad mode. So here we are in the first combat-oriented section of the tutorial quest. In this part here, I'm going to go through my combat options and I'm going to toggle on different numbers and information that will allow you to have essentially more information to work with while you are fighting enemies. So I'm going to turn on the number for enemy health bars. This will tell me how much health they have, the percentage, and those are just a few examples. If you want to see what settings that I use often and consistently, feel free to watch through this video and see what settings I use. Alright, so now we're going to start getting into the actual combat of the game. I want to go over some things that the game explains about the combat. So, first thing here, if you spam the attack command, you will light attack repeatedly. If you block enemy heavy attacks that are indicated by the yellow lines as they wind up, you'll block the heavy attacks. If you follow that block with a heavy attack of your own, by holding down the attack button, you will stun your target. If you hold block and tap the attack button, you will break free. And this break free works on stuns, fears, other forms of crowd control. Now here it's showcasing bashing. So if you hold block and tap attack while you're not stunned, you will block bash. And if you follow that up with a heavy attack, you will also stun your target. Alright, so that is what the game explains about its combat. Let's start talking about what the game doesn't explain. Alright, so the first thing that the game doesn't tell you is about tab targeting. So on PC, if you are facing an enemy, you can hit the tab key to outline them in white. As seen here, I only have this enemy outlined in red. I don't use tab targeting in this instance, and the reasoning being tab targeting is most useful when there's multiple enemies, but you only want to be hitting one of them. And so in this situation, if I had enemies that would cross in front of me, get in the way of me trying to hit my primary target, I would want to tab target them to make sure that my abilities and all my skills were directed at that target. If you're playing with a controller as I am, then you would hold down the right joystick. Alright, the next thing that the game doesn't explain, and I'm not going to get too in depth with it here, is light and heavy attack weaving. And I'm not going to explain what that is just yet, but I want you to keep it in mind in case you ever come across it in any other guide video. Next thing that the game doesn't explain is that heavy attacks restore resources based on the weapon you are using. So, if you heavy attack with a staff, you will regain magicka. If you heavy attack with any other weapon, quote-unquote stamina-oriented weapons, you will receive stamina back. The next thing that the game doesn't mention is that blocking, break free, and bashing all use stamina. And very importantly, if you don't have enough stamina, you can't perform these actions. This is something to keep in mind, especially in PvP or in especially difficult encounters. If you get stunned while you are low on stamina, you will not be able to break free, and this leaves you extremely vulnerable, and I'm very surprised that the game doesn't explain it. The last thing that the game doesn't explain is how off balance works. The game explains that if you block a heavy attack from an enemy and then heavy attack that enemy, that will stun them. The reason for this is because when you block a heavy attack from an enemy, it sets them off balance, and heavy attacking an off balance target stuns them. It's a similar situation when you bash an enemy who is channeling an attack. Interrupting that attack sets them off balance, which is why, again in this case, if you heavy attack that enemy, they will be stunned. Another important mechanic worth mentioning that the game doesn't even bring up in this initial combat tutorial is the importance of dodge rolling. Dodge rolling is done by double tapping any of the movement keys on PC or by holding block and using the jump command with a controller. By default, you will dodge roll backwards, but you can use the joystick to pick a direction to dodge roll in. This is really important later on in the game. Certain enemies will be so powerful that their heavy attack, even if you block it, will still one-shot you. In these circumstances, dodging is really important. You can use dodge to avoid projectiles or crowd control from certain enemies. It's extremely important in PvP, granting you invulnerability frames when multiple players are attacking you. So, something to keep in mind that I wanted to mention. Alright, so that about covers the Day 0 combat basics that I wanted to go over. The rest of this video is going to be talking about where to go to get your early quests done. Learning about how to complete quests is very important in this game. I'm going to show you where I recommend doing your first quest. So, as you can see on this map here, we started out in Western Skyrim. That's because I have the Greymoor chapter installed, and so I did the Greymoor chapter starting quest. If you don't have it, you would have started out in Cold Harbor, and after completing that quest, it would have taken you to one of the starter locations. So, regardless of whether you have the DLC chapters or not, every character will start out ESO with 6 way shrines unlocked. There will be 2 unlocked for each faction. One of them will be in the starter zone for that faction, and one of them will be in the starting region on the mainland for that faction. So for Daggerfall Covenant, the starter zone is Stros Mackay, and the starter region is Glenumbra on the mainland. Then for Ebonheart Pact, it is Bleak Rock Isle as the starter zone, And then Stone Falls is the starter region on the mainland. Aldmeri Dominion is Canarthy's Roost as the starter zone, and Auradon as the starter region. Since my character started out in the Daggerfall Covenant, her starter location would be Stros Mackay, which is where I choose to travel after having cleared Deepwood Vale in the Greymoor chapter. Specifically because Western Skyrim, as I said before, is not going to be that new player friendly. At this time, I would like to start to wrap up the video. It's important to know day 0 ends when your character makes it to the mainland. The way to do that is by completing the zone quests and the starter regions that I've mentioned. Following these quest lines will eventually lead you to the mainland region. The zone quests are indicated by a specific quest marker. You can see it in this frame in the upper right hand corner next to the text, "The Broken Spearhead." Following and completing those quests and respective quest markers will lead you to the mainland. An important parting tip is to have at least one ability from each of your class skill lines on your ability bar, as the skill lines will level faster with more abilities on your action bar, and leveling class skill lines is very important for character progression. In my case, I have Veiled Strike from my Shadow skill line, Assassin's Blade from my Assassination skill line, and Strife from my Siphoning skill line. That's all I have for day 0. I will catch you all on the mainland once your starter zones are complete and the real depth of the game can begin in day 1 of the series.